teacher of the group. We meet Sundays at 9:30 a.m. in room 274 at Thomas Road Baptist Church. And we look forward to you joining us so that together we may grow closer to God. Again to the group, and thank you for coming to the class today. And we will continue on our topic to relationships. Now, this past week, I was on a website related to mixed martial arts. It's one of my favorite things to watch on TV. And they had an article about a fighter who recently lost his match that cost him the title. And they brought up one of the reasons why he lost the fight. And the reason that he lost the fight, they said, was that him and his wife was going through a separation. And we hear that story all the time. I mean, you look in the grocery, the checkout line. Gossip magazines are filled with famous people breaking up. And it's very sad to read if those stories are true. Whenever people, especially when they're in a marriage, whenever they separate, that will have a significant impact mentally, spiritually, and physically. Help us understand the concept of relationship. We're going to talk about what is a relationship and why do we have a relationship. Then next week we'll talk about the how. I already got you guys flipping into the passage, Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, Genesis chapter 9, verse 1. And after we read those passages, we'll later dissect Ephesians chapter 5. In Ephesians chapter 5, in my personal opinion, that's the perfect illustration of what a marriage is supposed to be. So whoever has Genesis chapter 1, verses 28, could you please go ahead and read?
28, do I go any further than 28?
This verse 28.
Okay. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, using all its vast resources in the service of God and man, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves upon the earth.
And God pronounced a blessing upon Noah and his sons, and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth.
Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, and Genesis chapter 9, verse 1 explains what is a relationship. Well, first of all, God created us to be relational beings. Deep down inside our souls, we should discover that we desire a relationship. And throughout the Bible, there's many times where it refers that it's not always good for man and woman to be alone. And we see that God took Adam and Eve and made them as one. And Christ, whatever he talks about his relationship with others, he always talks about him and the church. And it goes back to marriage to help us understand what a marriage is. And the common thing in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, and in Genesis chapter 9, verse 1, it talks about marriage. Your marriage is to be productive and multiply the earth. And there's a lot of ways to multiply the earth. I mean, farmers, they grow crops, they grow animals. You own a business, you multiply, you make money. Families, they get together, they multiply. Your brothers and siblings, you multiply there. And God talks about his kingdom being multiplication through discipleship. So there's always constant multiplication and constant purpose. So a marriage is to help us understand what the concept of a relationship is to God and to each other. And it is also to multiply the world. So that is what a relationship is like. And I'll go ahead and read. And this is what Paul wrote to the church in Ephesus. Beginning in verse 1. Submit yourselves one to another in the fear of God. Wives, Submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives speak to their own husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church, and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought to men love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. For no man ever yet hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth it, even as the Lord the church. Paul's compared our human relationship between man and woman to the relationship of the church. Christ represents the bride. The church represents the bridegroom. And the whole thing that kind of anchors this begins in verse 25. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Now, what does it mean for husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church? Well, we have to go back and read the Gospels, but we don't have time for that today. So I'm going to give some short points to help us understand what it means for husbands to love their wives the way Christ loved the church. Now, how did Christ love us? Well, Christ not only talked about it, he also showed it. And a great point that Christ made of it, he says, a true friend is a person that's willingly give himself up for it. And in other words, he's willing to die for them. And Christ died for us. So not only he talked about it, he showed for it. So for a husband to love his wife and his family, he must be willingly give himself up entirely for it. And even, I hope it doesn't come down to it. A husband should be willing to die for his family, if that came down to it. That's how much a husband should love, and that's how Christ loved the church. But not only that, Christ provided for the church as well. Christ fed, the thousands. Christ provided Peter with fish, And also Christ protected the church as well, like a shepherd. And Christ is always being protected as that, So the purpose of marriage, to answer why is marriage, why do we have relationships? The purpose of our relationship is for Christ to get us ready for our day of marriage. If you go on in verse 26, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word. Christ has taken his word, and he has cleanses us to make us pure and holy, so that we may be ready before them. And husbands need to take care of their wives the same way. They need to pour the word to them daily, so that they too may also be ready. So that is why we need to know about relationships. We need to know how are we supposed to get ready on the day of Christ, and also we know what it is. And next week, next Sunday, I'm going to be talking about on how can we be ready, to help us understand more on the concept of relationships. My source is 14 Secrets to a Better Relationship by Dr. Dave Earley. And next Sunday we will go with the first 7 secrets, and after that, following Sunday, we will go secrets 8 to 14 to help us understand on how to have a better relationship. This is very important for us to know as believers of Christ. God created us as relational beings, and we need to invest in others the same way that Christ invested in us, so they too may know Christ and have an opportunity to receive him in his heart. And I thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you in class sometime soon, and God bless you.